Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Do you have a notepad? Do you have a pen handy? If not, grab that now because I want you to make a commitment that you'll jot down some notes, jot down some sort of action item that you will implement in your business today. That's what this is all about. Let's drive the business forward through implementation. Today, I want to relay a story to you, a consumer story. I want to tell you something that happened to me as a consumer. And I've told you before, one of the greatest ways that you can improve your business is to look at it and frame it through the lens of a consumer. If you could somehow look at your business through the lens of your customers, you would have great insights and you could make improvements. And the best way to do that is to have your antennae out and be cognizant of these types of things as you experience other businesses, products and services, and you are the customer, you are the consumer. So I do that all the time. And of course, we're all consumers and there's great learning opportunity every time you engage in commerce with any kind of service provider or purveyor of products of any kind. So there's a particular business that I have dealt with for decades, really. In fact, I did a little bit of rough math and I estimated that I have spent between $50,000 and $100,000 with this vendor. And this is not automotive, so I can tell you it's not like I bought a few cars from this. These are small consumable items. But over time, you use a lot of that stuff. Think of all the stuff you use around your house and use that stuff up and then you go and repurchase it and so on. So the reason I'm making that point is because there tends to be a larger margin in small ticket items than there is in, if you bought, to say, a house or an automobile, a car, there would be a much smaller margin in terms of percentage profit. But these people have made lots of money off of my purchases throughout the years is the point I want to get across. And the other thing that you should glean from that information is that they must be a good business. They have good products. Otherwise, I wouldn't continue to deal with them for a few decades. And I wouldn't just keep going back and I wouldn't spend that kind of money with them. I did so because by and large, they have products that represent excellent value in the marketplace. So I encountered a negative experience with one of their products twice. So I had bought multiples of this particular product and it failed. It did not meet my expectations. But because I had bought multiple, I went on to the next one and same issues. It just basically deteriorated. It wasn't a good product. But because it was so low priced and we're busy with life, I didn't make an issue of it. I didn't do anything about it. Now these people have a satisfaction guarantee. I know they do. I know they stand behind their products, and that's one, hallmark of an excellent company with excellent products. They're not afraid to stand behind their products. So I didn't worry about it. I thought, one day if I ever get around to it, I'll talk to their customer service and I'll let them know I was unhappy with this and I'll describe the experience and I'm sure they'll look after me. That's my experience with this company. And then fast forward several months, and I ordered from them. This is online, this is an e-commerce experience. And my order arrives and I notice that I'm short 2 items out of, I don't know, there was probably maybe 15 or 20 items that I had ordered, but 2 items were missing. And I checked the bill of lading and I checked my receipt, and sure enough, I wasn't mistaken. I did order this. I thought, well, maybe it was a mistake on maybe I deleted it from the cart or something like that. I verified all that and it wasn't my fault. I should be expecting these items. So again, you get busy and it's not, in this case, the items that I was missing were less than $100, but more than $50, somewhere in that range. I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but it was an emergency and I didn't need the item immediately. So I waited until, I had time to spare, and eventually I called their customer service line. And sometimes you go through a chat line, sometimes you'll email. I decided in this instance that I wanted to speak with somebody. I thought it would be the most effective, for at least from my customer experience, my perspective, this would be the best way to handle it. And I called them up and I spoke with he sounded like a young man who was very pleasant on the phone. He introduced himself and I gave him my customer number, and I gave him my order, like my receipt number, and I told him the situation. And he, did whatever he did, typed into his database, and he said, "Oh yeah, I see that they ship those out separately." And I thought to myself, "Oh, okay. Well, that seemed unusual to me based on my experience. However, I have run into this before when ordering online. Sometimes your products are shipped separately." And I want to make another point clear here: is this is not Amazon. This is not a retailer. I'm dealing with the actual company that makes the products. So I'm dealing with one company here. This isn't somebody who's just logistically shipping out, a middleman that's shipping out something from another consumer. But anyway, I've run into this before, that they shipped separately, and I thought, oh, okay, so it should be arriving any day. And you typically get used to receiving email or whatever telling you your shipment's on its way. And I wasn't getting that, so I was a little incredulous as the customer service agent was telling me that I should get this. And then he said to me, "If it doesn't show up in a few days, let us know and we'll look after it." And I didn't think much of it at the time. In retrospect, I think better customer service would have been for him to say, "I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give it a couple days because it should show up. And then I'm gonna contact you and just verify." Or in some way, they could have had an automated email to verify. They could have done something to make sure and put the onus on themselves. But instead, they put the onus on me as a customer. I didn't think that was that big a deal. But, he said, "If you don't get the item in a couple days, let us know, we'll look after it." Well, the item never did arrive. And I was, my incredulity that I experienced earlier, I thought, I didn't think that guy was right. It didn't make sense to me they would ship this separate, so he was wrong. But again, life gets in the way, and I got busy, and I didn't do anything about it. And then I ran out of some of the products that I use from this company, and I decided, I need to place another order. And that was what reminded me, hey, I never did get those 2 other items. So I picked up the phone again. I placed a new order and online, but then I picked up the phone again, and this time I got a young lady who was very pleasant on the phone as well. And I gave her the name of the previous customer agent. I gave all the details again, the customer number, the receipt number, and explained the situation. And I could tell on my end that she punched it into the system and was able to ascertain that indeed her information was the same as the other guys, that it was shipped separately, but it was returned to them for some reason by the shipping company. And I thought to myself, well, why wouldn't you have contacted me? In fact, I said, okay, well, that's fine. And she said, I can only speculate why. It could have been damaged in shipping or something like that, but the system indicates that it was returned to us. And so I'll go ahead and I'll reship out those items, a couple for you. And, my business brain started going, well, so if I never called, I was just going to be out that money. And that's a little disappointing. And the reason I share these stories with you, again, is we're trying to improve our businesses. We're trying to become more effective managers. And I want you to think, are you putting the onus on your customer to complain or to look and ensure your quality of experience? Are you putting the onus on your customer to notify you when something goes off the rail? Or are you proactively reaching out to them and getting feedback so that you can tell? Because even though I didn't take the time immediately to look after this situation, it was kind of irritating to me. It's kind of bothering. Not much. I have a good relationship with this company, but there's that little doubt. It's like, no, that's not, up to their usual standard of service. And here they don't realize it. Now, this company has grown large over the years. When I first started dealing with them, they were much smaller and they've become really big. And that made me start to wonder, is the customer service suffering a little bit? Sometimes when companies scale up, they lose some of that warmth that you experience with them when they're a smaller company. And maybe some of their logistics aren't as tight as they once were. And I want you to think about this in your business. So just continuing with the story, I asked her a few questions. I said, how come nobody contacted me? And she made up what felt to me a little like excuses. She was, I guess, transparent that it was speculation. She said, The system says it was returned, but they don't actually return it. So there was nothing that triggered to us that it didn't show up. That didn't make sense to me, because if their system shows, that means somehow it got communicated by the shipping company to their database that it was never delivered. And in fact, on my order history, I could see that it was not marked as processed or completed. It was still marked as processing. There were a few little other details that didn't make sense to me as I was speaking on the phone, and it's my nature to sort of delve into those things a little bit, but they're not important for the purposes of this discussion, so I'll leave those out. And she said, okay, I'll get this out to you right away. You should have that tomorrow or the next day, just really quick. And I was like, okay, great. I said, by the way, when I spoke with the last customer service agent, I also mentioned another product that, much less, in fact, the cost of the other product was like, two of them combined was like less than $10. In fact, less than $5. It was very inexpensive. That's why I didn't make an issue of it. But since I'm talking to customer service, I thought, here's that opportunity. I'll say, hey, I bought these other products and really they were just terrible. I don't think I'll buy them again. Would you just put a credit on my file or something like that? And what was returned surprised me a little bit in terms of the response. The customer service agent said, could you tell me when those were purchased? And I said, it was a long time ago, several months ago. I actually don't know. I don't have the invoice in front of me. I'd have to search through to find that. It's a long time. And she quoted to me the customer satisfaction policy of 120 days. And I thought, wow, really? This is like less than $5? And you're gonna tell me because it's over the 120? I said, well, the thing is, they were brand new when I tried to use them, and they deteriorated, and it wasn't your quality. I would think you'd want to know about that, and you would want to say something to somebody in quality assurance who oversees that product, that particular product, and say, hey, we've had a couple of problems with this. And that suggestion seemed lost on her a little bit. Now I was thinking to myself, in both cases when I contacted customer service, it said this call may be monitored or is recorded for quality assurance purposes and so on. You're all used to hearing that. And I thought, no, this is for training. I bet you this company does use these recordings. And I thought, well, you have a recording of this. Why don't you pass this along to management or whatever, and you guys can benefit, and just, an easy credit for me or whatever. And I thought she'd see on her system, this guy spent the better part of $100,000. I'm telling you, I'm conservative when I say 50. It may be in excess of 100,000 I've spent with them. I would think that their database would have flashing in front of her, this is an excellent customer, and keep him happy or whatever. But that wasn't the case. She was certainly cordial, very friendly, but it was all about, this is our policy. It's more than 120 days. And she said, I could get my supervisor involved, but the last time I did, since it was more than 120 days, it was the same result. And I thought, wow, that is not how I would want my company to be handled. Now, think about this in your case. Are you possibly having this kind of response to your customers? I know that if you climb up, maybe not that person's direct supervisor, but if you climb up the ladder in the hierarchy of that organization high enough, somebody very much cares about my business and it'd be like, I'm very sorry, Mr. Bickert. Absolutely, we'll put a credit. More than that, we'll thank you for sharing that information with us. We'll give you even a higher credit. Here's a free product or something like that to keep me happy. But I said to the gal on the phone, I'm like, wow, I would think somebody would want to know this. And I kind of expected you to just say, it doesn't matter what the length of our customer satisfaction policy is. This is a no-brainer for us to look after you. But the key here that I want you to take away is she was not empowered to do that. She already mentioned she would have to get a supervisor involved. And that was not my experience from years gone by. I have had experiences. Very seldom did I ever complain about any product or need to have anything returned or take advantage of their customer satisfaction policy. But when I did, the few handful of times I did, it was like no problem whatsoever. Very easy to deal with. And I didn't have that experience. So then again, I started thinking, is this because they've scaled so big? Have some of their customer-friendly policies been lost as they've scaled up and there's more hierarchy, more levels of management, and you start to think about that. And think about yourself in your business. And just like I said, there's somebody in management who would for sure look after me. And you're probably thinking, oh, in my organization, which is much smaller, I don't think anybody running an organization, this company deals with revenues in the billions annually. So this is a really big company. And you may be thinking, oh no, I got my finger on the pulse much closer. I want to make a point here, and that is, you would look after your customer if it was like what I described. You would say, oh, no problem, we'd look after them. And why would you? Because you want to retain your customers and you want to keep your customers happy, and so does this organization. But they've had to, as they scaled, as they've grown, they've changed their policies, and they've got somebody else on the front lines, sort of the gatekeeper for customer satisfaction. And I think ordinarily they do such a good job of their logistics that what I experience is very rare, but they haven't managed that well. They haven't figured out, well, what do we need to do? So let me get you to think again. If it wasn't you personally as the business owner who was looking after a customer, is there someone in your organization that you have 100% confidence that they would do the right thing for the customer? Think of that in your individual organization. Do you have somebody like that? Yes, we all do. And we're like, oh yeah, whatever that person decides, I trust their judgment. And here's what I'm getting at here. You need to empower your people, and empowerment requires trust. You have to trust your people. And in order to have trust between individuals, both parties have to be trustworthy. If there is somebody in your organization who you don't have that level of trust with, that you can empower them to make the right decision for the customer, you need to modify. You need to ask yourself, why? Why would I have someone like that in my organization? This big organization, I'm sure they hired both of those individuals I dealt with. I'll bet you dollars to donuts that they're very high moral people. They would not abuse the system, and that they are trustworthy, but the organization failed to empower them. By contrast, I have another story going back a few years. This is a real quick one, but in this case, the problem I had with the order, different organization, but again, it was the manufacturer or of the goods. They weren't just packaging someone else's goods and selling them as their own, and it wasn't just a shipping company. I was dealing with somebody who's a brand I appreciated, and I had a bigger problem that was in multiple hundreds, maybe $250, $300, and I assumed, I was dealing with a customer service agent via email in this instance, and I assumed I'd need to escalate the problem to management because there was a fairly substantial amount of money, I thought. And the guy who I was dealing with, the customer service agent, replied, you don't need to, I don't remember verbatim how he worded it, but it was worded very professionally. He emailed me back that he was empowered to make sure that I was 100% satisfied and I didn't need to speak to a manager. So instead of passing it off to a supervisor, as I had specified that I wanted him to do, he pushed back and said, there's no need for that. I'm empowered to make you happy. And in fact, he did. He refunded everything. He sent out a whole new shipment. It turned out the second shipment arrived and I had both. I emailed him back. I wanted to be honest. And he said, keep the other one, no problems. And they just really looked after me. And here I am telling that was maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. And I'm still remembering that. And I'm very loyal to that organization. By contrast, that first anecdote I shared with you, it's been grating on me. I've told this story to several people, and I'm kind of like thinking, that just really deteriorated my trust in that organization. What if it was a bigger item? If they're going to make this a big deal over $5, do I have to worry about, when I'm using their products, that I got to use it up within 120 days in case there's a problem? They don't want their customers thinking along these lines, and I'm sure that the powers that be, the executives in that company, don't want this, but they're not aware that this is happening. This is flying under the radar, and some of that can happen in your organization. And it comes down to a lack of empowerment. So make sure that you empower your people. Make sure that if you've got somebody who, as I mentioned, is like the gatekeeper, your customer service agent, somebody who is responsible for customer support tickets of any kind and quality assurance, that they are empowered to do the right thing for your organization. Now, here is a really critical point. The reason that this gets away from organizations where they fail to empower and give, say, those 2 customer service agents I dealt with, if they would have had empowerment to, make the customer happy, whatever it takes, you have up to $500 leeway that you can spend to make the customer happy. You could pick a number for your product or service, and you don't need to get management involved. There's 2 things. Well, first of all, the reason that organizations don't do this is they're afraid of someone abusing the system. They're either afraid that the customer may abuse the system, or they're afraid that the employee, the customer service agent, may abuse the system. But here's the thing, you need to manage for that in your organization. So in your database, they could have easily, in the database in my example, they could have, how many times have I requested a refund over the several years, and they would have saw this guy hardly ever asked for any refund. How much money has he spent? How good a customer is he? All that, the person that I empower can look into that to make sure that they're not dealing with a customer who abuses the system. So if you're worried about that, don't be like a central authority and try to manage with a policy. Instead, empower your people and trust in their judgment. And now the second thing, you can also track your customer service. Anyone in your organization who is offering refunds and doing things and offering goodwill of any kind to your customers, you can look at that and you can have reports printed out and say, you can compare, and you could have a standard of acceptable amount that you would expect nobody would exceed. And when they do, when you experience on your reports outliers, now you can investigate and you can talk to the person. And very often it may be legitimate. You can go, wow, ooh, we didn't know that happened. That's really important. Thank you for sharing that with us. We're going to go to the quality inspector on the line. We're going to look what's going on here. That is, invaluable intel on your quality, your logistics, your processes, and your organization. But you don't have to fret that you have a customer service agent who's going to abuse the system and give his friends a bunch of freebies because he's empowered to. That'll show up on a report. He will be an outlier. It'll show up and it'll be like, well, everybody else is around, this level in terms of goodwill that they offer, but you have a spike with this particular individual. And you can do the same thing with customers. So don't manage by the exception. Instead, manage by the rule and track the data and think about it and analyze it and discuss and collaborate with your team. Now, go back to your organization and talk about this. And if you don't have, the other anecdote, I don't want to really get too far off, is there's that Toyota story of the factory manager who came from a different OEM, a different automotive manufacturer, over to Toyota, and he was so proud of how his line was running very efficiently and pumping out the engines, I believe, was what they were making in this particular factory. And the Japanese executives asked him where he was hiding his mistakes. And long story short, they said, we know that every line has mistakes and has flaws, and since you're not showing those to us and you're producing these kind of numbers, we know what to expect from the data, how many mistakes would occur, and since you're not showing those to us, you're hiding them somewhere. We know they exist. That's what I'm talking about here. You should have data that you can rely on. So look at this kind of thing. Look at your organization. And today I just really wanted to focus on customer service, and you do not want any of your customers feeling the way I feel. This happens a lot more often than you realize. Is a really good customer, it's called a customer attrition or defection. You lose a good customer, and do you know why? Or are you afraid to ask? That's flawed logic. Don't allow your fear of hearing bad news, where you don't want to hear that you've got some poor quality of materials, workmanship, or poor quality individual representing your organization, poor quality customer service, whatever it may be. You want to find out about that. So pay attention and proactively ask your customers to give feedback. And reactively, if you are recording phone calls or you are monitoring, you should be your customer service incoming support tickets and everything. Take a look and find out, how are we going to improve as a result of what we've learned from this. Yeah, so there's my stories, and I'm going to be talking to my team and making sure that we are doing exactly what I said. And you've got to revisit this from time to time and make sure that you recommit. Because as I said, in the organization that I first talked about there, they were excellent for customer service, and I think they probably still are. They're very successful, but they have deteriorated from my original experience in terms of customer service. And that comes sometimes when you grow. So you might be like priding yourself on how good you've been and how you've got great customer reviews and great testimonials and feedback from your customers, but are you growing as a result of that? And are things getting a little bit off your radar? Or do you maybe not have your finger on the pulse as closely as you once did? And what can you do to mitigate that and get back, tighten things up and get back to that incredible customer service commitment that we should all have, so that we retain customers and grow our business? I think that's where I want to leave it today. I hope you got something out of this and that you will really reflect on customer retention in order to grow your business. Leave some sort of comment in the comments section that we can all learn from, because we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.